Today we're going to make keto donuts. You'll need 1 bag of vanilla master mix, 5 large eggs, 1 stick of unsalted butter, 3/4 cup of heavy cream, coconut oil non-stick spray, a pan for donuts. I highly recommend the USA Pan brand. They're very high quality and they don't stick with my mix. You'll also need a piping bag and a large container or vase and a spoon. To start, preheat the oven to 350 degrees. Take your bag of vanilla master mix, and we're going to follow the recipe that's outlined on the back of the package. This is what I refer to when I mention method number 1. Open the package and remove the sweetener packet and the dry mix packet. The sweetener packet may start to separate. Don't worry, this is completely normal. Place the stick of butter in a glass bowl and use a spoon to add the sweetener directly on top of the butter. It's very important that you put the sweetener directly on top. It'll prevent the butter from popping in the microwave. After you add all of the sweetener, melt the butter in the microwave. This can take anywhere from 2 to 2.5 minutes. I'm gonna put mine in for 2 minutes and 30 seconds. While the butter's cooking, grab your donut pans and coconut oil spray and spray in a circular motion, covering every inch of the pan. This will prevent our donuts from sticking. If you're using a piping bag, this is also a good time to start prepping it. Grab your container or vase, insert your hand in the piping bag and place it into the vase. And then as you slip your hand out, you're going to fold down the top of the piping bag over the container. Now you'll have an opening where you can pour your batter and it'll be a lot easier than trying to hold the bag. Here's our butter completely melted with the sweetener. Add the 3/4 cup of heavy cream, and we actually want our heavy cream to be cold because this is going to cool down the butter and allow us to add the eggs directly into the melted butter. So here's a baker's tip. When you're cracking eggs, make sure that you crack them in a separate container first, just in case you accidentally get a little bit of eggshell in there, because there's nothing worse than biting into a nice velvety cake and then crunching on some eggshell. And you'll see while I'm making this video, I accidentally get a little bit of shell into the eggs, and you just see I just take one of those eggshells from the cracked egg and scoop it out nice and easy. We're going to add all 5 of our eggs into a separate container just to make sure there's no shells in there. Pour the eggs into the butter, sweetener, and cream mixture. Using a hand mixer, we're going to blend the eggs, sweetener, and cream together until it all is a smooth consistency, about 20 seconds. If you don't have a hand mixer, you can use a whisk. It'll just take a bit more muscle. Add the dry mix in 2 parts. So we're going to pour in half the dry mix and using the hand mixer, blend until it's completely one consistency. We don't want to see any more of the dry mix left. Once that's done, we're going to pour the second half of the dry mix and repeat, mixing until it's completely the same consistency, one cohesive batter that does not have dry mix around the sides. So sometimes it helps if you sort of turn the bowl around and tilt it just to really be able to get all those different angles so there's no dry mix left. You don't want to overmix here, you just want it to look one consistency. Now we're going to take that container that we prepped with the piping bag, and this is where it comes in handy because we're going to pour in our batter using a rubber spatula, and this would be kind of difficult to do with one hand. And even I've been baking for a few years now, and I really prefer this method of adding the batter to the piping bag because it just makes it so much more easier. And as you can see, I'm scraping down the bowl and scraping the sides of that container. It really keeps your piping bag nice and neat. Okay, so we've got all our batter inside, so now we're going to lift up the overhanging plastic of the piping bag and lift it out of our container. And we want to twist it all the way around so it's nice and tight and secure. Now the batter won't come out in our hand as we tilt it into our palm. So you'll notice there's air at the tip of the bag. We're going to cut the very tip with a pair of scissors, and it should be about a 1/2 inch diameter. This should be just large enough for us to pipe it out into our pans. Holding the bag at a 90-degree angle, we're going to squeeze, move counterclockwise around the pan, lift and release. So squeeze, moving counterclockwise around the pan, lift and release. And we want to leave about 1/4 inch from the top because these donuts are going to rise. So you just repeat until you filled all the donut pans with this squeezing motion, moving counterclockwise, release and lift as you've reached that 1/4 inch threshold. And you may need to use your opposite hand to move the batter down the bag and then just retwist to get a good grip and continue that same technique. Once you've filled all the donuts, you may still have some batter left, and just look through the donuts and see which ones look a little bit lower than the others, and then just add that extra batter on the top. Now we place these in the oven for 20 minutes. After they've baked for 20 minutes, we're going to take them out of the oven, and they should be this nice, beautiful golden brown color and smell amazing. These donuts are going to be very tender while they're still hot, and we don't want to handle them before they've had a chance to cool off. So let them sit for about 15 to 20 minutes before you try to take them out. It's time to release the donuts from the pan. My favorite way is to use the tip of a rubber spatula to lift out the donuts. You can also use a plastic knife to remove the donuts. You just don't want to use any metal on the pans because it'll possibly scratch it and ruin the nonstick coating. So the second way you can release the donuts from the pan is to take a cookie sheet that will fit over the surface of the donuts, put it gently on the top and flip it over and give it a little bit of a tap, and they should fall right out. So you see all 6 of our donuts came right out as soon as they were flipped. You should be able to get at least 12 regular sized donuts from 1 bag of Master Mix. Now we're going to glaze these donuts, and in order to do that, we're going to put them in the freezer for 1 to 2 hours. They need to be nice and firm and cold in order to dip them in the hot glaze and get a nice shine to them. So let's pop them in the freezer.
2,000 years later.
Now that the donuts are frozen, we're going to move on to the glaze. You'll need a 1/2 cup of erythritol, a 1/2 cup of heavy cream, 1 stick of salted butter. It's important that it's salted this time. You'll also need 1/4 teaspoon of English toffee better stevia. This is really going to take your caramel to the next level, as well as some xanthan gum. We're first going to start off with 1/4 teaspoon of xanthan gum into the 1/2 cup of erythritol. Mix it together really well with a spoon or fork. This is going to keep the xanthan gum from clumping up in our glaze. Add the stick of butter into a small pot. We need to start browning the butter. You want to brown it at about medium low. We don't want it to burn or cook too quickly. And as the butter starts to melt, the milk deposits are going to separate from the oil, and that is what's going to brown. Notice how it looks very frothy on the top. This is the milk deposits that are separating from the oil that's in the butter. And as it cooks, there's going to be less of this foam on the top, and that's when you know that it's close to being ready. Okay, it's been a little bit longer now. It's been closer to 12 to 15 minutes. And notice that there's less foam on the top. When I start to whisk, you can see more of the browned butter underneath the foam. This means we're getting closer to it being ready. At this point, you should also start to really smell the fragrance of brown butter. It's very distinct, it's very rich, and it's going to complement our donuts very well. Now this is getting just about done. You see that the foam is dissipating from the top, and when we stir it, we see a lot of the brown liquid underneath. At this point, we're going to pour in our erythritol and xanthan gum mixture directly into the brown butter. Next, we pour in our 1/2 cup of heavy cream. It's going to start to bubble up, but it shouldn't overflow. And finally, we're going to add that 1/4 teaspoon of English toffee stevia. This really is my secret ingredient. Everyone who's had my keto caramel has said it's the best they've ever had, and that's one of the reasons why. It really helps to develop the flavor. At this point, we're just going to give it a little stir, and then we're going to let it simmer for about 15 minutes undisturbed. Okay, our caramel's done. Notice how it is now the consistency of a thick syrup. And we're gonna take our frozen donut, use some tongs because it's very hot. We don't wanna burn our hands. And we're just gonna dip the very top of the donuts. And you might need to dip it and swirl it around a couple times so it's completely covered. And there you go, it's covered with the caramel. And place it on a parchment-lined baking sheet. And we'll just repeat using the tongs. We're going to dip the top of the donuts. You may need to do it a couple of times until it's completely covered, and then place on a baking sheet. As the glaze starts to cool, it's going to harden and get a little bit lighter on the top. Before it completely firms up, we want to add a little bit of salt to just add that little bit of contrast with the sweetness. It's completely optional. I will put a link down below on my favorite salt to use, but a nice piece of flaked sea salt on each one to garnish will really elevate the flavor. And here's our keto salted caramel donut. Look at that beautiful glaze. If you like this recipe, please give me a like and subscribe to my channel. It really helps me a lot. And turn on notifications so you don't miss the next recipe. You can find your bag of Butter and Nuts Vanilla Master Mix on my website, www.butterandnut.com, and you'll also be able to find the written version of this recipe as well as the full macros. I'd love to hear how you like this recipe, so follow me on @butterandnut and hashtag #mybutterandnut to get your creations shared.